Elevate TV, advancing kingdom lifestyle.
Shalom and good evening. My name's John Wesley, and I'm so delighted to be coming to you tonight on the show that is one of your favorite shows called Encourage a Pastor. I'm sitting in on behalf of Apostle David Juma. Was not able to host the show tonight, but nevertheless, do not worry. It's going to be amazing, and it's going to be a good time. You know, every time we come on Encourage a Pastor, the objective is to encourage every minister of the gospel, whether you're a pastor, a bishop, an apostle, whether you serve in any leadership capacity in the church. This is your show to keep you going. And tonight, I know what is on every pastor's mind, or at least every bishop's mind, is the new proposed regulations that we received this week through the Mutava Musimi-led team. And we want to talk about it. We want to understand what all that is about. Some of the proposals were made. We want to deal with the myths. We want to deal with the truths. We want to deal with the facts. We also want to expose the lies. So invite every pastor you know, every man of God you know, and tell them, listening, this is your show. Remember, go ahead and share on Facebook, on YouTube. We're also live on Elevate TV. My guest is none other than Madam Bernice Gachegu. She is an advocate of the High Court. She's a fellow in the ICPSK. Those of you who understand what that acronym stands for, you know she is not a junior person. And of course, she is the former Registrar General of Societies. And I'm so glad to have you here, Madam Bernice Gachegu. You're welcome.
Thank you, John. I'm a little bit hustled because I've just arrived from Nakuru.
Yes.
But thank you for your warm welcome.
Amen.
Yes.
Yeah, don't worry about that. You will do well. And of course, yeah, she mentioned she's just coming from Nakuru, and that explains why we are about 10 minutes late. Please forgive us for that. You're important to us, but we'll make it up with this. Now, recently, Madam Bernice Gachegu, there was, you know, this team that has been doing round, the Mutava Musimi team, for, I believe it's more than a year, if I'm not mistaken. Would you just like to give us a little bit background on what necessitated the formation of that team? What was it about? Did the government just wake up and decide we would just want to regulate churches or religious movements? What's the background of this?
Thank you, Pastor John. Well, I think the background of this is really in the public domain. We had the Shakahola incident where many Kenyans lost their lives through extremism, radicalization. This whole Bishop Mackenzie's church was like a cult. And we saw in the media, in the dailies, people went there, they starved to death, families lost their loved ones. And in the end, there were just so many bodies. We're not even quite sure how many deaths, but definitely over 100 if they've accounted for all of them, because they had to identify them with DNA. And because it was such a tragedy in our nation, obviously the government had to do something about it. And so the government set up this presidential task force to look into the whole area of extremism, radicalization, and how do you address radicalization? How do you address extremism? How do you protect Kenyans from rogue pastors, if I may use that word, that are into error and would lead them to death, as it happened in Shakahola? So that was really the background. Yes.
I remember there was an attempt through the Githumwigai formations a few years back, and then, of course, later during the previous government. So this is something that has been going on for a while, and we're just coming to, you know, just like we're like in the final bit of it. So the team comes up with this religious organization policy, the proposals, what we're calling the proposals.
Yes.
First, before we even begin to deal with the cracks of the issue or the detail of the reports, there have been some panic reports.
Yes.
And one of the biggest one is that churches will be required to be, register again, go through the whole process all over again. I don't know if you're familiar with that, and is it true or not?
Okay, so I think, Pastor John, one of the things we'd want to bring into focus or to clarify is that the government did not wake up and decide we're going for the churches. And indeed, the Presidential Task Force had terms of reference. And the terms of reference was not go after the church. And one of the terms of reference was identify the legal and institutional and governance challenges, the gaps.
Yes.
Identify the gaps that have led to extremism and have allowed an incident like Shakahola. And then formulate proposals on changes going forward. So they did have a specific terms of reference, which really was based on what happened in Shakahola. So we need to bear that in mind. The government didn't wake up and decide, we're going to get hard on the churches. There was a background, there was an issue that happened, and the task force had very specific terms of reference. And I was privileged when Hesabika organized a Zoom meeting for church leaders.
Yes.
And Reverend Mtava Musimi and Senior Counsel Kanjama actually tried to take us through. So as much as I'm reading the report, it was very helpful what they pointed out. So with that background, what I loved about this presidential task force is they built on the foundation of what had happened before.
Okay.
So this discussion about regulating churches is not new. And if I recall, NCCK had made some proposals some time back saying there should be a Registrar of Religious Society. Evangelical Alliance of Kenya had made some proposals. The Gachegu rules had made proposals.
Yes.
And what is I find very welcoming in this task was they read all of those documents and have made them part of the foundation. So they built on a foundation. They didn't just come up. And one of their recommendations was that some of the previous task forces, like you remember there was a task force some years ago on devil worship.
Yes, yes.
That report is somewhere gathering dust. So one of their recommendations was, would those reports be operationalized? Would they then, they should see the light of day. There was even one on schools. You remember when schools were being burnt?
Yes.
So one of the recommendations, because they built on a foundation, was that all of those proposals and recommendations should be operationalized. So from my perspective as Registrar General, let me say that in the time that I was Registrar General, I registered the following organizations under the Societies Act.
Okay.
Political parties, sports clubs. And because the Societies Act has so many gaps, it really was a toothless bulldog. And so you had rogue members of political parties. Pastor John, you would find Pastor John is a member of LDP, KANU, Fodasili, and then, they would come to my office, I had to have security.
Yeah.
And then we came up with the Political Parties Act.
Okay.
And that streamlined the political parties. You don't hear of those things. There's real serious discipline. Then we had the Sports Act, which removed now the Gor Mahias and the AFC from the Societies Act. Again, they were streamlined.
Okay.
So what has happened was bound to happen sooner than later because the Societies Act has gaps and the church is well aware of that. It does not, for example, it does not create a corporate personality that allows a church to own property, to be a legal person in their own right. In terms of regulation, yes, it provides that societies should file annual returns, but they don't anyway, and nothing happens.
Okay.
So I think church is the only body that is still left in the Societies Act. A lot of the others now have their own enactment that has streamlined and is regulating.
Okay.
So I think we need to say that this was going to happen sooner than later. Okay, Shakahola is what broke the camel's back, but sooner than later. And the churches themselves have said, we need a law that regulates us. We're distinct from football clubs, from welfare societies. We need a law that talks about us and thinks about us.
Okay.
But the churches, of course, have always argued for self-regulation. Yes, yes.
So are we required to register again or not?
No, that's a false rumor. Indeed,
Okay.
the task force recommended that all registered churches are registered. All they need to do is to update their records. They will not have to register afresh.
So the fears that everybody will have to register, those are...
No, that's unfounded. They have recommended that whoever is registered. They just need to update their records.
All right.
Yes.
All right, that's fair enough.
Yes.
Now that we have that elephant dealt with, let's go to the issues, the proposals.
Yes.
And I know there's quite a number of them. I was going through the policy, the proposals, and they talk about 11 gaps
Yes.
that they discovered.
Yes.
And then they also talk about 13 proposals, a raft of 13 proposals that they made. And probably this, my intention, hopefully, is before we're done today, at least look at, if not 5, 6, 7 of those gaps and what they have recommended. The first one is the lack of a policy framework and distinct legislation on religious organizations. I think you just alluded to that.
Yes.
That they discovered is a gap.
Yes.
Then they also talk about the lack of statutory clarity
Yes.
on the nature of crimes committed in the pretext of religion. And I think that is where I'd like us to dig a little bit deeper. What proposals then did they come up with, and to deal with these crimes that are committed?
Okay, well, I think what they've done in the statute is, first of all, to define what those offenses would be.
Okay.
And then to provide for how punishment for those offenses. But even more than that, they have, under this law, they have made a society becomes a distinct legal personality with power to own property, to be sued, to sue in its own name. Secondly, I think one of the gaps or something that they address is the whole issue of umbrella bodies.
Okay.
And they have recommended that all churches belong to umbrella bodies. And these umbrella bodies will be the way the churches will self-regulate. In other words, the churches will be accountable to someone. So that a group of churches will join the umbrella bodies and they will be accountable to that umbrella body. They've also recommended for the establishment of a commission that will look and govern the whole area of religious organizations.
Okay.
And they would and then they have created the position of a registrar who would be appointed, and a tribunal where if you were dissatisfied that maybe your registration was rejected or you had an issue, you can appeal to the tribunal. They have also emphasized alternative dispute resolution. You may not know that our courts have been bogged down with members of churches who are infighting about property, about whether you're the chair or I'm the chair, and they're saying, let's create in our regulations, in our constitutions, alternative dispute resolution mechanisms. And where we're not able to resolve the issues, let's refer them to the umbrella body. Let's refer them to the tribunal, so that the courts are not bogged down with those kind of issues. Yes.
What do they envision to deal with? And I don't know if you're privy to some of what they would qualify crimes committed in the pretext of religion. Say, for example, would corruption be under that description of crimes committed in the pretext of religion, or what specifically were they looking at?
One of the ones that comes to mind is the Constitution guarantees us freedom of religion, conscience, expression, and so coercion, for instance, you cannot coerce anyone to be a member of your religion. Kenyans must continue to have that freedom freedom of religion, freedom to practice their faith the way they deem fit.
Okay.
So I know coercion is one of them. In the policy, they also talk about building religious tolerance, that we need to accept that we're a country with many religions, and therefore I must respect your religion and allows you to practice it. But I certainly remember the one on coercion. But they've tried to create specific offenses that are punishable under this law. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And well, that's good. Now, the other gap that probably like us to have a conversation over is what they call lack of regulation of online broadcasting of religious content. They say that discover there's a gap on how to regulate what churches or religious organizations project out there using broadcasting. I don't know if you're privy to that as well, and what recommendation they may have proposed.
I think it's amendments to the act that
Okay.
that licenses broadcasting stations. But what they pointed out is many of the people that went to Shakahola, this was advertised by media. And there's a lot of harm that can be done through media. You know, live miracles, fake miracles, money for miracles, anointing oil, and all of that. And I'm aware that they've recommended sensitization of the public so that they can distinguish what is genuine, what is false. So I think it's the whole part that media plays in advertising and publicizing those sort of organizations. Of course, they're good ones as well, and the harm that it does, because we understand that people came from far and wide to go to Shakahola.
Yeah.
But who advertised? It was media.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Wow.
So they're not trying to control that. They're just saying amend the media law so that content, we can scrutinize the content.
So the
Yes.
pastor shouldn't be worried that they're going to be coming after their live streaming, because I know
No.
after COVID, a lot of the servants of God went online and began online ministries.
No. And I don't think the task force has that mandate. They can recommend, let's amend the penal laws, the penal code, but they're not the ones to do it. They can only, so I think they're asking for the media laws to be re-examined from the perspective of content and protecting citizens. Yes.
Let's open a bracket there. You just mentioned about their mandate, the limitation of their mandate.
Yes.
Then the question would be, or what should the pastor understand as far as these recommendations are concerned? Are these laws yet, or they're just proposals? And what procedures will these proposals go through for them to become law? And is there any room for participation? Is there going to be public participation in the same? Will there be an opportunity for different religious leaders to give feedback on the same, or to react to some of these proposals?
Well, that's a good question, Pastor John. Well, it's a draft bill.
Okay.
It's a draft bill. And as a draft bill, it certainly would have to go to the Attorney General, possibly to the Legislative Drafting Department, Kenya Law Reform Commission, and then be moved to Parliament.
Okay.
But Reverend Mutava Musimi did mention that in their handing over this report to the President, he did say that he would involve the stakeholders.
Okay.
So from where I stand, I see that stakeholders will be allowed to comment, to interrogate. And my encouragement to the church would be, let's read these documents. Knowledge is power. Let's interrogate them and be able to make comments from an informed perspective. And I like that Hesabika already organized that forum where Reverend Mutava Musimi and Senior Counsel Kanjama took us through the bill, the regulations, the report. And what was interesting, Pastor John, there just wasn't enough time for questions. There were about 200 people logged in.
Wow.
Many questions. So this is what we need to encourage the churches to do, whether it's just within their membership or under the umbrella bodies. Let's interrogate and bring to the table informed content.
Okay.
Let's be able to say, we're unhappy with this from actually reading the content and making recommendations. So if all the excitement and the panic would be used to read the document.
Okay.
And some of these, because they're legal documents, they're lawyers in churches. These lawyers could take the members through and let's interrogate and read them, because it's like it really puts a high premium on umbrella bodies, which church already. By the way, one of the limitations of the society is that it doesn't provide for registration of umbrella bodies. You were talking about gaps.
Yes.
It doesn't.
Yes. Yes.
But here they're recommending we will register. Let umbrella bodies be registered with member churches and with specific terms of reference, like sorting out disputes, holding the members accountable. They've made a recommendation that under the Societies Act, you don't have a list of members. if you're a registered church, you need to have a list of your members. You need to file your annual returns.
Okay.
Yes.
And I'll be coming to ask you questions about the annual returns and what that entails. But probably to even explain further the issue of, the whole issue around what you just talked about. What then is the way forward regarding the issue of dispute resolution, apart from the umbrella bodies, dispute resolution, and what's the power, what are the limitations of these umbrella body organizations? Can they be used to punish, for vengeance, for trying to silence people they don't like? Is there a legal framework that puts some limitation or delimitations on the same?
Well, that's a good question, Pastor John. And maybe you would allow me at this stage to talk about the draft code. I know you've heard about the draft code.
Yes.
Code of conduct for churches.
Yes.
And I know that the task force has recommended that every church should have a code of conduct. And in this code of conduct, it talks about what an umbrella body would be, what would be its mandate. It must be independent. It must be impartial. It must follow the rule of law, natural justice, that every person that's accused, if Pastor John is accused, he has a right to respond.
Okay.
So I would highly recommend, and I know that this code of conduct was also presented to the task force.
Yes.
But it really does provide for stewardship of finances, for code of conduct for church leaders, for umbrella bodies, alternative dispute resolution, and how you would conduct matters that are brought to church. So at least the church is blessed that there is already a code of conduct that they could look at and adopt. And I know that the task force received a copy of the code of conduct. Yes.
Yeah. Because there's a real fear out there that maybe some pastors may be feeling, okay, now we are required to join umbrella organizations.
Yes.
That umbrella organizations under the new proposals will have certain powers to exercise. So it's important to encourage the pastor to know that there is actually a legal framework for these umbrella bodies to work under, so that they should not be afraid of any retribution.
Well, Pastor John, I think the whole idea of the umbrella bodies is the self-regulation that the churches want. They really want to demonstrate to government we are able to regulate ourselves. So we are members of an umbrella body, and in cases of disputes, we are able to refer them to the umbrella body. Yeah. We will avoid going to court as much as possible, and to solve our own problems within the church and within the umbrella body. In fact, in this code of conduct, it even recommends that every church should have a dispute resolution mechanism, even before they go to the umbrella body.
Wow.
That allows members, it could be the members accusing the pastor falsely. So it recommends that every church should have an internal dispute mechanism.
Okay.
Yes.
Another point of interest I saw there talking about gap. This is how, I'm just going to read it verbatim, but help me understand it. Lack of an effective framework governing the limitation of rights and fundamental freedoms provided for in Article 24 in the practice of religion. I read that statement, and immediately in my mind I was thinking, limitation of rights and fundamental freedoms. I'm just asking as a layperson, what does that mean?
I think the regulatory framework can be looked at it's wide. For example, the Societies Act does not provide for minimum standards.
Okay.
So if Kamau wakes up today, or Unyango, and decides I'm going to register a church, there's no minimum standards. What is a church? So they're saying, can we define what is a minimum standard, and who can register a church, and what's the minimum? And by minimum, it means you're not making it high, you're just giving it the minimum. So, and then how is that church governed? I noted one of the provisions is they must have a certificate, and it must be sealed with a seal. Like I've said, they must provide annual returns that talk about who's the chair, who's the secretary, who's the treasurer, who are the members. Every church must have a constitution that governs it. in terms of their annual general meeting, how they handle donations, how they handle gifts, just that whole area. And the task force really has recommended a hybrid where there's self-regulation, but there's a level in which then government is involved through the registrar who registers and the commission that is established, yes.
Wow. So it's not really a limitation in the sense that the layperson will understand it.
No, it's not.
But just a framework on how...
It's a framework on how we operate, yes.
Brilliant.
Yes.
We're about to go for a break, but there's another question. You just mentioned the issue of taxes, or rather filing returns, and I said I'll come back to it.
Yes.
Let's open up a bracket there and talk about, and I'm going to ask you straightforward. Does the government want to tax the pastors and the religious organizations beyond what has normally been happening? And probably can give a framework of what has been happening in terms of what we've been filing as returns.
Well, so let's differentiate returns to the registrar, because the returns to the registrar just says Pride International Church, these are the members, this is the chair, this is the secretary. If members, if for example the chair is no longer in the country, they would have elected a new chair. This is our registered office, this is our email. The returns to the registrar just give info about the church. Tax returns is a different issue, and my understanding is that many non-profit, which churches are non-profit, enjoy tax exemption, but it's not automatic. So under our existing laws, non-profits apply for the exemption. I can't start my non-profit and say I'm tax exempted. I need to apply for it. So the government is not going to tax churches any more than they have. Non-profits are exempt, but they apply for the exemption. There's nothing like that. That is not the intention of this report and the law.
Okay. There's an involvement of the DCI into the matter, or investigative bodies, like qualification of officials.
Yes.
They'll need what they call certificate of good conduct. They'll need a tax compliance certificate, and so on and so forth. Are they coming after individuals? I know these are a bit tough questions.
Well, Pastor John, even when I registered churches, we used to refer the applications to intelligence, just to tell us who is this person. And the intelligence would actually go and verify. This is Mr. John Joroge or Charles Oching. This is where they reside. This is where the church is. And would give the registrar a report, a clearance report. Because the registrar doesn't know or doesn't have the human resource capacity to go. So that's not new. Every church, if you speak to all the registered churches, NIS did investigate and give a report, a clearance report to the registrar before they were registered. And that even applies to companies limited by guarantee because they're non-profits. Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'm here with Madam Bernice Gachegu, an advocate of the High Court and the former Registrar General of the Societies Group. And so this is very, very enlightening and informational, educational as well. I believe that all the pastors that are watching, and I can see quite a number of you, you're getting to have some information that is necessary. We're going to take a short break. We will be right back. Please do not go anywhere. Just have your dinner, continue having your dinner. We'll be back.
This Sunday at 8:30 p.m.
We cannot blame those who are selling water.
No.
We blame their fathers.
Whose child are you?
This is an episode you won't want to miss.
Church transitions from one leadership to another.
Many of these people, this has become their kiosk. So when you tell them to close this kiosk, where are they going to go?
Featuring our special guest, Bishop Joseph Moffat, Senior Minister of Bethel Church.
Let honor ring.
Many of our ministers today are saying, Fathers have left us. Fathers never leave their children. The father is where you left them.
Let people work. Let the church grow.
When you give this ministry to sons who say you are out of this place, get out of this place, he goes and you remain with a curse, not a blessing.
Hosted by the insightful Pastor Sonte Juma.
Fathers are an example to us. They have paid the ultimate price. It is our time to pay the price.
Tune in this Sunday at 8:30 p.m. only on Elevate TV. Be inspired, be transformed.
Welcome back. Again, I'm sitting in on behalf of Apostle David Juma, and I must say I'm very grateful, sir, for giving me the opportunity. And I'm in studio with Madam Bernice Gachegu, and she is doing an excellent job explaining to us the recent Mutava Musimi-led team proposals on church regulations. And that's not really church, actually religious organizations, regulations on that. And please understand, they are proposals. I think we mentioned that, and it's important for us to read the document to understand this program is an attempt to explain to you, man of God, on what you need to do. And before we go into other issues, I think I'd mention to you, Madam Bernice, that there is this pastor who does not have a salary. And most of them will be found within the bracket of what we call charismatics, evangelicals, Pentecostals. Far removed from the mainstream churches. Don't have a salary, they do not file nil returns, some do, and now they are afraid that this issue that requires them to be tax compliant or have tax compliance certificate is going to, get them nabbed. What's your advice? What's your encouragement to this pastor? How do they align?
Pastor John, there's a saying that the only permanent thing about life is change.
Yes.
And we don't like change. As human beings, we don't like change. But changes must come. Mm-hmm. And my advice would be file new returns. Okay. Many people file new returns because KRA itself now has upped its game and we're having to be compliant. All of us as citizens, I'm aware today if you applied for a job, you need that tax clearance even to be considered. So it's a change, it's uncomfortable, but let's just get on with it and file nil returns. Okay. You will not be penalized for it. It's about compliance. It'll be uncomfortable, but we'll get into the rhythm of doing it. I mean, I don't know if we've always carried IDs, but when it was decided we must have an ID, we got an ID and we carry it. Yes. and we live with it. So I would just say, just file the nil returns. Just file the nil returns and get into that habit. Like I was saying that even to the Registrar of Societies don't file annual returns. Now they will. And it's good for them to be able to file annual returns to show who is this church, who are the members, who are the officials. So I think let's just do it. Yes.
That's. I hope the man of God is encouraged. Please, let's get aligned in Jesus' name.
Yes, let's get aligned. I like that.
There is a requirement or a recommendation on that touches on the qualifications of clergy that serve in churches and those, of course, who register denominations. One of the requirements is a certificate in theology. I don't know whether I haven't read through to see if it's a degree level or a diploma or just a normal certificate. What is your take on that? And what do we do with those members of the clergy that have been in ministry for a long time, some of them quite elderly, who are still serving in churches and don't have the legal papers, educational qualifications? What do we do with these people, and what are the recommendations to? Because I know that it's not just going to be a blanket. There must be, a narrowing down to specific groups of people. Mm-hmm. Let me give you an example. That pastor in Samburu, that pastor in Turkana, who may not have even had the opportunity to have the basic levels of education, but is called of God and is serving and has a church and has been doing it, for a while. What do we do with that man of God?
Wow. Well, Pastor John, like I said at the beginning, the task force built their report on previous reports. They did look into previous reports, and it's the Gethu Muigai rules that had recommended that pastors must have either a diploma or a theological qualification of some kind. That is already in the Gethu Muigai rules. What I understand the task force has recommended, let the umbrella body set that standard.
Okay.
Because the umbrella body, like you rightly said, will know this is Reverend Jane or Reverend James. He has a call. He's served for many years. So the recommendation there is let the umbrella body, but let there be a criteria. Let there be a minimum requirement. And so it's not going to lock out pastors. It will not, because it's the umbrella body that was set. And I remember in the question time in this Hesabika meeting that I told you, people started raising issues about Bible colleges. How are they going to be impacted by this? How can they be informed on who to train and how to train, and in sensitizing? So the umbrella body has that mandate to set that standard.
Okay.
Yes.
Fair enough. In the first half, we dealt with some of the excesses that necessitated the formation of this, this team that went out doing, collecting data all over the country. Some of the extremes, some of the issues that, that required this report to be written. I'd love for you to probably give us a few more of these extremes. And then one of the recommendations is that there's going to be civic awareness and sensitization on religious extremism or radicalization. How is that going to be done? Who is going to determine the curricula for that? All right. What is extremism? Are there definitions? Are there parameters? Just if you can address
That's
that.
a good question. So first, let me start on the issue of offenses. And I mentioned the one on coercion. It's an offense, or extortion, extremism, and then political activity. I think one of the things that has been recommended is that the church must not be used for political activity. That's not where politicians will come and campaign. And I think that was long overdue. You'll agree with me, Pastor John. So those are some of the offenses. Now, sensitization. I think that the task force in the policy and in their report have really emphasized sensitization. And I think that we have many groups in our society, whether they're NGOs or non-profits, that can embrace this mandate and say, yes, we are going to go out there, and because now we have a law that is sensitizing people, we will go out and educate people on what's extremism. We'll even go and listen to them and get to know, what do you consider to be extremism? It's public participation, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I think it creates a great opportunity for many of the NGOs and non-profits, including a body like Hesabika, Evangelical Alliance, all those NCCK, the other umbrella bodies, to go out there and to sensitize their members. It's an opportunity. It's a great opportunity. And perhaps even to introduce a course in the Bible colleges that teaches on this subject matter. Yes.
I think that would be amazing, civic awareness.
It's an opportunity.
One of the other gaps that they talk about is the rehabilitation or lack of rehabilitation and reintegration programs for people that have been affected by religious extremism or cultism. What proposals have they made? What kind of proposals are they making to help that person who's been a victim, and so that they are rehabilitated and reintegrated into society, and ensure that they don't just live life out there waiting to die or go into a depression because of something. I'm asking that question thinking about the Shakahola survivors, those that have survived the issue of the commercialization of the gospel, being taken advantage of. Remembering reading an article, a report some years back, of a lady who gave everything she had to a particular man of God. And now the family wants it back how do we deal with those kinds of people? And does this team have proposals that will help those kind of people?
Thank you, Pastor John. I don't know that I've seen specific proposals, but my reaction to that would be the church has that responsibility. Let's assume I was a KDF soldier and I'd been fighting in, Al-Shabaab, for example, and I'm suffering from post, trauma, but I'm a member of your church, Pastor John. There is a responsibility there, and I think that even as we think about how are we going to rehabilitate, if there are people who are in our community, in our church, we have a responsibility. And as you know, in Kenya, we have associations like people who counsel, we have rehab centers. It isn't any different. It really belongs to that category of psychological trauma, abuse, and I think it's that now that this has been highlighted, we need to come up as a society. I know when we've had an air crash in Côte d'Ivoire and families are affected, government has called up counselors, professionals to deal with survivors. So it's a big area, and I think it's one that we need to tackle as a society. How do we rehabilitate those who come and have been traumatized in those sort of situations? Yeah.
Okay. During your time as a Registrar of Societies, Registrar General, I know that pastors are part of the people that get licenses, special licenses to officiate marriages and stuff like that. Did you see any excesses in that area? And does this proposal here address that specific area where we have probably some members of the clergy abusing their privilege or not aligning to the whole issue of Christian marriages?
Okay, good question. We didn't have problems with marriages because for you to perform a marriage, the registrar has to license you. And
Okay.
for you to be licensed, your church applies for you. And when the church applies for you to perform marriage, the registrar goes back to the society's file and finds out who is this church, who is this author of this letter, is he an authorized officer? So we didn't find abuse in marriages. What we did find, though, is many churches squabbling. In fact, I once said to the bishops, you guys are going to send my staff to hell because you come to our offices, you're fighting over property, you're fighting over who's the chair, you're fighting over who should do what. And these young state councils came to work having a faith, and now they're saying to me, the only church we know is the Catholic Church because we don't see them fighting. So we had many issues in terms of leadership, squabbles, property, churches that failed to hold annual general meetings, but we didn't see abuse in marriages because that's, you have to be licensed. And remember, once you're licensed, you're given a book by government, and then you're required to file a copy with the Registrar of Marriages. So I didn't experience abuse in that area. It was more non-regulation among the churches and just, yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough. And I think it's really unfortunate that you had to endure that together with your staff. On behalf of the servants of God, I apologize.
I received that apology.
Yes, we do.
Especially for my staff because they were young lawyers. They were young in their faith, and they had never imagined that their pastors could fight in the offices about property, about you're the chair, I'm the chair. I think it was not a pleasant experience for them.
Yeah. You've talked about umbrella bodies, and I think it's important that we amplify that a little bit more, because I see the recommendations here giving a lot of credence to umbrella bodies. How important is the formations of umbrella bodies, and why is it important that the pastor pays attention to that specific proposal going forward, in even how we interact with government in terms of that particular proposal?
Well, umbrella bodies will become very important because it's a demonstration by the Church of Jesus Christ in Kenya that we're self-regulating, that I'm not just doing what I am a pastor and I'm just doing what I am accountable to someone. And an umbrella body is likely to have many churches. It won't be just one church. and they are likely to be members who have the same doctrine.
Okay.
You've talked about charismatics, Pentecostals, so they have the same doctrine, but they're holding each other to account. They're watching each other's backs, for lack of a better word, and therefore, whenever we are accountable to an authority, it's good. We avoid excesses, we avoid the radicalism. If I'm going wrong, there's an opportunity to be corrected. So I think going forward, umbrella bodies are going to be very important. And now that we have a devolved government, this report and law anticipates that the umbrella body will have members from different counties. It wouldn't just be that we're an umbrella body just in Nairobi. It would have members from the 47 counties. It would have regulations. But above all, it's demonstrating to government we're holding ourselves accountable. We're accountable to one another. And if you think about it, Pastor John, whether you think about the Law Society of Kenya or the Institute of Certified Public Secretaries, what is it? It's a professional body that holds the members to account.
Yes.
It just says we want to keep a certain standard as lawyers, and we don't want any rogue lawyer to abuse this standard, because then we lose our credibility in society. Mm-hmm. So that's how I see an umbrella body. It protects the profession, it protects the church, it protects pastors and bishops, because there's an accountability. Yes. So
Wow.
going forward, they will be really critical and they'll be important. And church needs to begin to meet and agree how they want to move forward. And I like that this bill recognizes that there will be several umbrella bodies and people will be able to come together and agree. Yes. By the way, in Kenya, we already have many umbrella bodies.
Yes.
The societies that may not provide for it, but we have many umbrella bodies
Okay.
already that are in existence.
So, Madam Bernice,
Yes.
here is a man of God
Yes.
who has a denomination running that has a few branches across the country,
Yes.
and they refuse to join an umbrella body. What happens to them?
Pastor John, my response is they don't have an option.
Okay.
There must be an umbrella body that they can agree with. They can't be just sole operators. That there's nobody in Kenya of this 60 million that they can agree with. There must be. So I think the answer would be you need to find an umbrella body. You need to bring together people where you have similar doctrine and come together and form an umbrella body.
When you say they have no option, do you mean there will be legal repercussions?
I don't think so,
Yeah.
but I think that they will be disadvantaged. They will be disadvantaging themselves.
Okay.
Yeah, they will not
Okay.
be demonstrating to the government that here I am, I'm self-regulating. I am accountable. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Let's go into the matter of records management system. Probably, and I think when these recommendations were made, they must have been looking at those churches that do not have, records or don't keep a consistent, clean record of stuff. How important is that for the pastor listening to us to keep proper records?
I think it's very, very important to keep records, and the task force has raised the bar because they've even recommended that even for the registrar must digitize and be able to keep records. Now remember, the records that come to the registrar come from the individual churches. It's this church that will say, our church, this is the name of the church, these are the office bearers. So the bar has been raised and they've highly recommended a digitized registry of
Okay.
all the religious bodies and organizations.
Okay.
That of necessity means that every pastor will have to keep a good record, because that record then is what you share with the registrar in your annual returns, in the documentation that's been recommended. So the bar has been raised for all of us to keep. It's very important to keep good records. Who are your members? Yes.
Okay.
Yes, very
Does that
important.
include financial records? Audited financial records?
Well, I know that in the Code of Conduct, we have recommended
Yes.
that every church should have their accounts audited, and every church should distinguish what is a gift to the pastor and what belongs to the church. And what belongs to the church should be registered in the name of the church. During our public participation on the code, there was a pastor who said, for me, when I receive the tithe, it goes into my pocket. It's my money. So now to be able to educate from a governance structure and say that tithe that offering belongs to the church, which is a legal entity. That does not stop your members giving you a personal gift. That's your personal gift, but you must separate. If the church buys a vehicle, it should be registered in the name of the church. That doesn't stop them from buying you as a gift, if they so choose. But to separate your personal accounts and the church accounts, and to, as far as possible, have them audited, and then have an annual general meeting where you present those accounts. And corporate governance is now the trend globally. Everybody's wanting to have good corporate governance. So why would the church be left out? Let's audit our accounts. Let's keep proper books of account. Let's separate what is my gift and what belongs to the church. Why would the church want to be left behind? Corporate governance is the order of the day today, yes. Accountability.
Let me keep on poking that bear.
All right.
The issue of declaration of source of funds. I think I read there that in an effort to deal with the whole issue of money laundering, that one of the recommendations and proposals is to declare source of funds that the church receives, and also to declare the activities of the church. If you're running charities, what are those charities? How are you spending these monies? And I think that's part of accountability and record keeping.
Yes.
The issue of source of funds. Maybe there's a pastor there thinking, if I have to declare source of fund, the people that donate or give to my church or my ministry may shy away. Maybe some of them don't. The Bible says, do not allow the right hand to know what the left hand is doing.
Pastor John, my understanding is that the main source of funding for every pastor is tithes and offerings.
Okay.
So that's in the public domain.
Yes.
We may not know who gave what, who gave 1 shilling, like the woman who gave a mite in Jesus' time, and who gave $1 million. But the source for the funding for the church is tithes and offering. So to declare where that comes from, I don't find that offensive, Pastor John. It already is that. And I know churches where they would even announce, we have received a gift. Maybe it's from even a foreign body abroad.
Okay.
So what I give is confidential. What I give as my offering and tithe is confidential. But the church's main funding is from tithes and offerings and gifts. And so nobody's offended if I receive a gift in my church, because that's how churches raise funds.
Okay.
Yes.
I think that's fair enough. Man of God, be encouraged. I hope we're serving that purpose tonight of encouraging you as a man of God, and even making sure you have all the information you need to understand the raft of proposals that have been made by the Mutava Musimi-led, I don't know whether, was it a commission? Or what was it?
A task force.
A task force.
Yes.
And I believe that some of these conversations that we are having are helping you to build an understanding. My encouragement and what I'm hearing is that we need to read and understand, and we need to participate when we're called upon to. We need to make the proposal, we need to ask the questions, and I don't think the window has closed or the door is shut. There's still room for further recommendations, fine-tuning on some of these things that you see. Let me ask you another question. It's not the last one, but in your own opinion, having listened to the Mutava Musimi Zoom meeting, was it yesterday or the day before that, and having scanned through some of these proposals, in your own assessment as an advocate of the High Court, as a believer, do you see any mischief in this document? Or would you say, for example, I see there's a weakness in this area, or this requires further input and conversation and discussion?
Thank you, Pastor John. I am a firm believer in public participation. And even before I talk about this task force, in my time as Registrar General, we went through various, we repealed several laws. I already mentioned how political parties was removed from the Societies Act, sports. The other thing that happened in my time there was a lot of our laws in Kenya are based on English acts. For example, the Companies Act was based on the 1948 English Act.
Okay.
So we had to come up with a new Companies Act. We had to come up with a new Insolvency Act. We came up with new marriage laws. Now, having been in government, I just feel that if you want to succeed when you have new laws, you must do public participation. It must be co-creative.
Okay.
People must feel this law has come to help us. Because if it's imposed from above, then you as the regulator will have difficulties. I remember when the new marriage laws came, pastors coming to see me and saying, "Madam, would you give us state councils that can come and take us through the marriage laws?" Because we are struggling, and not everybody's a lawyer, and not everybody's able to interpret.
Yeah.
So I have not seen mischief, but I will say this. The church must engage, and this is the time to engage, whether it's going to be in small groups to really read through and say, is this prejudicing us in any way? Can we speak up? This is the time, because even for the regulator, even for government, it's much easier to implement what people have accepted. This has come, this is to help us, this is helpful. It has not come to police us, it has not come to make life difficult. And only public participation does that, as people begin to say, yes, that section, that provides for this provides for this, the regulations. So I think from what was shared and the questions, that I have not seen anything that is negative or that prejudices church, but I think we need to engage so that we are operating from a position of information.
Okay.
And those that have churches where there are lawyers as members, let's form groups. Let's begin to just go through the sections. And this is the season. We don't want to wait and later say, oh, we're unhappy. This is the season. And this momentum that has been created by the report of the task force, let's keep it going. And let Hesabika and other bodies, EAK, NCCK, charitable, other umbrella bodies that exist, Congress,
Yes.
KCCAM, there are many. Let's engage our members. Let's engage this document and bring something to the table to government. So that even, and I think it's in the interest of government to do that as well, because I was a regulator, but I found where people didn't understand the law, they didn't comply because they simply didn't. But if they understood, this is for my protection, this is to enhance what I do, then they will run to comply. Yes.
That's beautiful.
Yes.
My final question. Constitution says there shall be no state religion. Do you feel, as an advocate of the High Court, that some of the proposals, some of the policies and the legal framework that government is trying to come up with infringes on that particular statement, there shall be no state religion? Do you feel there is an infringement on the religious freedoms?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the task force went to lengths to say they have to try to create a balance, because between freedom of religion guaranteed me by the Constitution and what I can and cannot do. I have freedom of religion, I can practice my religion, whichever religion I want, but do I contravene others' rights to enjoy that religion? Do I threaten life?
Okay.
Do I go into extremism? So they said they really tried to create a balance, that balance that allows me to still enjoy my constitutional right to freedom of conscience, religion, to practice my faith, and yet create an accountability that in exercising my right, I do not abuse you or infringe on your right. Yes,
okay.
Yes,
okay.
To create that balance. And
So,
I think this whole idea of the hybrid, of where you have self-regulation and umbrella bodies and some form of regulation through the registrar, through the commission, is to create that balance. Yes.
so that pastor, that man of God who feels, because I have seen some statements on social media platforms thrown around by clergy, you cannot legislate spiritual activity, you cannot legislate spiritual functions of the church. Do you feel that's what the government is trying to do, or is the government really working hard to protect its citizens against these excesses that we're talking about? What's your honest opinion?
The government is seeking to protect the citizen. And you know, it's so interesting. This code of conduct was designed some years ago.
Okay.
When Shakahola happened, it's like the steering committee was revived. We started going to share with people. It's like we thought government is not going to allow Shakahola to just go, you know. And so why don't we get ready before even we get there? Why don't we begin to have a code of conduct? Why don't we begin to self-regulate? So government must protect its citizens from any kind of extremism or harm. And so church should use this opportunity then to say we are self-regulating, we're joining umbrella bodies, we're being accountable, and we will not be accused of abusing citizens of this nation. Yes.
Amen.
Yes.
We're out of time, Madam Bernice. Thank you so much, despite your busy schedule, and coming all the way from Nakuru just for this show.
Thank you, Pastor
I know
John.
you did mention earlier you need to learn to say no.
Yes, I did.
but I'm glad you said yes.
Well, you've made it very easy for me, and I've enjoyed the interview.
Thank you.
I think you made me comfortable, and I've appreciated it. Yes.
I appreciate that as well.
Thank you.
Well, dear man of God, servant of God, I hope you're encouraged, and I hope the show has given you some basic information about some of these proposals. My recommendation, please read this document. Familiarize yourself with it, and make sure you have forums and conversations about these particular proposals. Come together with other servants of God, and let's engage the government, let's engage the necessary teams, so that we are part of the process. Let's not be locked out and complain later. We have an opportunity. My recommendation as well, I'll just pull this code of conduct here. Every man of God should get a piece.
Yes.
A copy of this particular code of conduct was done by our own people,
yes,
our own pastors and leaders and professionals. Please make sure you do that. I hope you're encouraged, man of God. One more time, my sincere gratitude to Apostle David Juma and Elevate TV for creating an opportunity like this. My name is Apostle John Wesley, and I'm so grateful you watched tonight. Keep sharing this after we're done. Keep it locked. Keep it Elevate TV. Go to church tomorrow. Shalom.